Welcome to Origin Story, the show where we go over origin stories, expanded universe, and fan theories, and try to find the answers to some of the biggest mysteries in your favorite video games and television. Today, let us ask ourselves, what is Mario's origin story? First things first, let us establish who is Mario. Who is he really? No, I'm not going to go all game theory on you and tell you that he's a psychotic killer or some jazz. But before we go into his origin, we should establish who he is in universe. Mario is a silent protagonist and plumber who regularly rescues Princess Peach from a giant turtle named Bowser. Pretty straightforward. From what we can see in the games, much like Homer Simpson, Mario has an impressive resume of many different and varied jobs under his belt. This includes, but is not limited to, a plumber, a doctor, a demolition worker, a carpenter, a golfer, a race car driver, a Vietnam soldier, a tennis umpire, a tennis champion, a brewery worker, a cement factory an NBA worker, player, a baseball stunt bike rider, an artist, a toy maker, park owner, boxing referee, fighter pilot, a marine archaeologist, an animal trainer, and a submarine captain. Before we move on, I feel it is very important to note that there are many inconsistencies from game to game. When Game Informer interviewed Shigeru Miyamoto, they asked him, time and time again, Bowser kidnaps Peach. Why do Mario and Peach still race go-karts and play tennis with him? And he responded with, if you're familiar with things like Popeye and some of the old comic characters, you would oftentimes see this cast of characters that takes on different roles, depending on the comic or cartoon. They might be a businessman in one cartoon or a pirate in another. Depending on the story that was being told, they would change roles. So to a certain degree, I look at our characters in a similar way and feel that they can take on different roles in different games. It's more like they're one big family, or maybe a troupe of actors. That being said, moving forward, we're not going to try and make sense of every single aspect of the Mario universe, because we'd be here all day. Just shine some light on some of the more interesting mysteries, particularly regarding Mario's origin story, hence the title of the series. For example, we're not going to try and explain why Bowser, who is a terrorist threat to the Mushroom people, is able to casually play party games, sports, and go-kart racing with everyone on every other weekend. Shigeru Miyamoto was also once quoted as saying something along the lines of, when making these games, the priority is not on making a consistent timeline. It is to make a fun game. Mario's house looks very different from game to game, with its first appearance being in Super Mario RPG, and most commonly appears in the RPG genre of Mario games. It is safe to say that it is at least within a walking distance of Princess Peach's castle, as it can be seen quite clearly in the background in Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. Similarly, Bowser's castle also changes from game to game, though that's pretty understandable considering it always collapses by the end of every game it's in. The Koopa Kingdom exists somewhere within or just around the outskirts of the Mushroom Kingdom. That's all well and good, but how did Mario get caught up in all this insanity? Rescuing princesses and kingdoms and all that such? He's just a plumber after all. And speaking of which, where did he learn what he needed to know in order to become a plumber? Well, surprise, surprise, he hasn't always lived in the Mushroom Kingdom. Let us go back to the very beginning. As most people know, our story begins with Yoshi's Island, literally detailing the story of Mario's origin as a newborn being delivered by a stork to his and Luigi's parents before being knocked off course by Kamek, who had predicted that the Mario brothers would cause trouble for Bowser in the future. So from this we can gather that Kamek has knowledge of future events, including the original NES games. Mario lands on the titular island and meets Yoshi, triggering the events of that game and the quest to bring the Mario brothers back to their parents. At the end of the game, we meet Mario's parents, or who we think are Mario's parents, but it's soon found out not to be the case. In Yoshi's New Island, which immediately takes place after the events of Yoshi's Island, we discover that the stork delivered the babies to the wrong parents. Are you kidding me with this? That's right. The intro to Yoshi's New Island completely invalidates the happy ending in Yoshi's Island. I'm starting to wonder who else got their deliveries messed up because of this, as the game refers to him, Silly Stork. So the stork gets knocked off course yet again, and Yoshi's New Island begins. During the ending of that game, future Bowser comes back in time to help his minions, so this becomes the first chronological instance of time travel in the Mario series. But of course, his plans fail and the Mario brothers are delivered peacefully to the right house after rescuing baby Luigi and the stork. For real this time, quote unquote, according to the game. But who are Mario's parents? As of 2016, Yoshi's New Island is the only canonical appearance of the Mario Brothers' parents in video games. But the Mario Brothers do fondly talk about them quite a bit in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show animated series. The parents have been mentioned a couple more times in comics and children's activity books, but only for very brief periods of time, or not at all. Nintendo wants to keep Mario's parents faceless for the most part, sort of like Charlie Brown's parents, as they are not really a significant part of the story. Based on what we know, Mario spent a small part of his childhood on Yoshi's Island, then got delivered to a mushroom house where his parents supposedly live. And we know that he spends most of his adult life in the Mushroom Kingdom, in his own house not far from Peach's castle, so he can rescue her on a frequent basis. However, his parents are not toads, they're human, which means they likely do not originate from the Mushroom Kingdom. Now that's not to say that humans can't live in the Mushroom Kingdom, just that it doesn't appear to be very common in the games. We also know that Mario and Luigi are human, and are of Italian descent, because official media constantly refers to them as Italian plumbers. So where are Mario's missing teenage years? If you go by just the recent games, you'd probably be quite satisfied with believing that Mario was always part of the Mushroom Kingdom, from the last moments we see him on Yoshi's New Island and Yoshi's Island DS, up until we see him as an adult in the first Super Mario Bros. Game. But what if I told you that this wasn't always the case? We know that Nintendo occasionally likes to retcon things. Now Bowser Jr. is canonically Bowser's only child, when in the past we knew the Koopa kids to also be Bowser's children. It's not something that we the fans made up and projected onto the games. Various media all throughout the 80s and 90s outright said that they were Bowser's kids, and we had no reason not to believe that. So it's pretty odd now that they've gone back on that. But whatever, can't argue with the word of God. Now back onto the main topic at hand, the missing chunk of time, Mario's teenage years, which is strangely absent from most if not all of Mario media. It's during this chunk of his life that Mario likely moved from the Mushroom Kingdom back into the quote-unquote real world, as it is referred to in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Mario, being human, likely wanted to grow up around other humans, so at any point after his early childhood, but likely during his teenage years, he moved to Brooklyn. Then he got an education and probably started becoming an expert in a variety of different fields, becoming a doctor, an athlete, a carpenter, and finally, a plumber. It has been established that Mario, at some point in his life, lived in Brooklyn, before finding his way back to the Mushroom Kingdom. Not just in the cartoon and in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, but also in the official Super Mario 64 game manual. So we have a location backed up by an official source. The Super Mario Bros. Super Show is the only piece of media outside of the movie that shows Mario's origin story as quite this in-depth, taking of course the Japanese anime film where he was literally sucked into a video game world, and the American movie that had very little to do with the video game that it was based on, with a grain of salt. But in the cartoon, the Japanese film, and the American film, Mario's origin story in this respect is displayed with some form of him going through a portal into the Mushroom Kingdom to save a princess. In the cartoon, Mario and Luigi end up in the Mushroom Kingdom by being sucked into a warp pipe connected to a bathtub drain that they were unclogging during a plumbing job. In the movie, it was an interdimensional wormhole. In the anime film, it was literally him jumping into a video game. Despite not having any direct connection to the video games that they're based on, I'm thinking that these stories wouldn't be so similar unless there was some merit of truth to them, canon or not. It is heavily implied in the manual, in the cartoon, and in the game that the original Super Mario Bros. Happened immediately after Mario, as an adult, first shows up in the Mushroom Kingdom, which means during this time, Mario has been away from the kingdom for most of his life, and probably needs to readjust again. At this point in time, Mario and Luigi do not have their own house in the Mushroom Kingdom, and he hasn't even seen the princess since he was a baby. One could possibly argue that the arcade game Mario Bros. Is Mario's journey through the pipes to get back into the Mushroom Kingdom, as it clearly takes place between Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros. Now, before people ask about loose ends, you're probably wondering about the Donkey Kong arcade games. Well, I've left that till last because due to contradictions with the modern series of Mario games, something about them doesn't quite add up with the story that Nintendo wants to pass off as true. See, in the original Donkey Kong, the titular monkey steals Mario's at the time girlfriend Pauline, and climbs a building so he has to rescue her. This version of Donkey Kong, according to the official game story, was Mario's pet that he abused. The only reason that Donkey Kong kidnaps Mario's girlfriend in those games is because he abused his pet gorilla until the breaking point. Lovable sweet Nintendo mascot over here. In the sequel, Donkey Kong Jr., Mario cages Donkey Kong and his son Jr. goes to rescue him. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, that's all well and good. Mario could have easily done all that stuff before the events of Super Mario Bros., but here is where things start to not make sense. In the Super Nintendo game Donkey Kong Country, created to reboot the Donkey Kong franchise, the story says that Cranky Kong is in fact Donkey Kong from the arcade game, and the main character of these games. Donkey Kong is actually Junior all grown up. But in Yoshi's Island DS, we see baby Donkey Kong and baby Mario, and they are both about roughly newborns at this time. So naturally the questions are, is this baby Donkey Kong that appears alongside baby Mario in Yoshi's New Island classic Donkey Kong, aka Cranky Kong, or is it modern Donkey Kong, aka Junior? And is modern Donkey Kong the son of Cranky Kong or the grandson of Cranky Kong, making him classic Donkey Kong Jr.'s son? Now, if you've already seen the game theory episode on this topic, you would know that the popular fan theory going around at the moment is that modern Donkey Kong is not Junior at all, but Donkey Kong Jr.'s son and Cranky Kong's grandson. The fan theory goes that Mario from the original Donkey Kong was not modern Mario at all, but Mario's father, Jumpman, and modern Mario's mother was Pauline from the original game. But something about that doesn't add up either, as Pauline appears again in the new Mario vs. Donkey Kong series. Most things, least of which the appearance of Princess Peach, Luigi, and the Toads in this series, would indicate that it takes place in modern Mario's adulthood, meaning that the Mario that appears in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series is not Jumpman. I mean, it just seems to be a little bit of a stretch to say that there just so happens to be another girl named Pauline that showed up at Mario's toy factory. Unless this fan theory is trying to imply that this Pauline is the original Pauline's daughter, something just doesn't add up. To me, either version of events could potentially work, but both come with their fair share of contradictions and questions. If Mario as we know him today and Jumpman from the original Donkey Kong games are one and the same, then you can easily say that it takes place after Mario's teenage years in Brooklyn, and before he goes back to the Mushroom Kingdom in the first Super Mario Bros. But if Jumpman, aka Mario from the Donkey Kong games, is modern Mario's father, that would place the events of the Donkey Kong games before or during the Yoshi's Island games in the overall timeline. This would imply that the parents seen at the end of Yoshi's New Island are Jumpman and Pauline, and that at some point after Yoshi's New Island, Jumpman dies in the game Donkey Kong Jr., as theorized by the ending. And the reason that this theory is so popular is because we see a halo above Jumpman's head when he dies in that game. In no other game except the Donkey Kong arcade games do characters die like this, and thus fans believe it is symbolic of Mario's father's fate. Now guys, you can pick whichever version of events makes more sense to you personally, because until we get an official Mario timeline book that lists all of the plot points in chronological order, everything is up to speculation. I'm not going to tell you that my interpretation is the only correct one. You go out there and you decide for yourselves what makes sense for you. After all, it's only a video game. Hey everyone, thanks for watching! This was sort of a remake of a show I did on my second channel called Origin Story, where I looked into the origin stories of popular video game characters and pop culture characters that aren't really elaborated on as much as you'd think. I've decided to merge this idea and my usual Video Game Freak uploads into one single show, which I shall now refer to as MegaMitch. Yep, that's the new title! I might make more videos like this in the future, exploring fan theories or whatnot, so let me know what you think. And if you enjoyed, let me know in the comments section below, and consider subscribing while you're at it. Also in the description, I'm gonna put down some interesting videos related to different Mario fan theories done by other YouTubers that you may also enjoy, and that I certainly found interesting. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day, and normal episodes will resume shortly.